Hello students, today we will be discussing about the second part of animal tissue. You know that in the previous video we have already discussed about the introduction to tissues and the first two topics of animal tissue, that is the connective tissue and muscle tissue. Under connective tissue we discussed about blood. Under muscle tissue we broadly discussed about cardiac muscle, skeletal muscle and smooth muscle. Today we are going to discuss the final two topics, that is the epithelial tissue and the nervous tissue. Now we'll discuss about epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue is a special tissue which lines up the internal and external surfaces of the body. For example, the outermost covering of our body, the skin, it is an epithelial tissue. And the internal, the lining of the mouth and all the internal organs are lined by epithelial tissue. For example, epithelial tissue is like the covering of a book. The polythene cover which we put on the book, similar to that, it covers, the epithelial tissue covers the whole of all of our organs. When we look at the characteristics of epithelial tissue, the basic character of epithelial tissue is that the tissues are very tightly packed. For example, the tissues are tightly packed. This is one type of an epithelial tissue. These are the epithelial cells. Nucleus of the cell. And always they are tightly packed, that is the first feature. And the second feature is that they always lie on a basement membrane. They need a basement membrane. It is the only tissue which lies on a basement membrane. So this basement membrane is very important. It is a unique feature of epithelial tissue. So these are the cells tightly packed. Tightly packed cells, and this is the basement membrane. And the next feature is that this epithelial tissue here does not have a direct blood supply. Now if we consider the basement membrane, this is the basement membrane. There are other cells below the basement membrane. This is the topmost part of the organ, and this is the epithelial tissue which is covering that whole organ. So within that there are other cells and they have blood supply. But this blood supply is not present in the epithelial tissue. These blood vessels do not go until the epithelial tissue. So that is the third feature of epithelial tissue. Blood vessels do not enter. They are below, but they do not enter into the epithelial tissue. Then how does this epithelial tissue get its nutrients? The nutrients from these blood vessels slowly travel. They don't travel through blood vessels, but they come out of the blood vessels and slowly travel to the epithelial tissue. And this epithelial tissue has a nervous supply. Nerve supply is present, but blood supply is not present. Nerve supply is present, therefore if someone touches you, you can feel that, or if something pricks, you can feel that, but if you prick deeper, blood will start to ooze. So this is the basic features of epithelial. Depending on the type of the cell present on the basement membrane, there can be single cell, multiple cells, 2-3 lines of cells. There can be many types. Depending on the shape and the arrangement of the cell, there are 7 types of epithelial tissue present in our body. But in our local syllabus, we do not discuss deeply about all those. In advanced level, you will be discussing about each and every type of epithelial tissue. But for now, we will just remember about epithelial tissue and its function, but we won't go into the types of epithelial tissue. So let's go to the functions of epithelial tissue. It is a very important one. So there are 5 main functions of the epithelial tissue. To remember these 5 main functions of epithelial tissue, we have come up with a small short form. That is, remember FPAS. FPASS. If you don't remember the functions of the epithelial tissue, you might get a FPAS for your results. Okay. So remember FPAS. F for filtration. We know in the kidney there is a B.U.M.S capsule. You will be learning it under grade 11 systems. The kidney's function is to filter the blood and remove the waste. There, the point where the blood is sieved, we have epithelial tissue. So the main function of the epithelial tissue present within the kidney is filtration. And next one, P for protection. Now our skin, it is the best example. Our skin is an example of epithelial tissue. Our skin protects the internal organs. If we do not have the skin, even touching a person, he will feel pain because the skin is not there. It will be touching the organs directly. So skin is a protection. Not only that, many types of microbes, bacteria, they try to attack our body, but because of the skin, they cannot go in. Therefore, epithelial tissue, the skin epithelial tissue gives protection. So protection is a function of epithelial tissue. Then the next one, absorption. We know that the food which we eat carbohydrates, protein, lipid, fat, all those things. When they go within the alimentary canal, within the digestive system, when it goes, it undergoes breakdown. There is mechanical breakdown and chemical breakdown. Under chemical breakdown, carbohydrates break down to starch, then starch breakdowns to maltose, maltose to glucose, like that many processes are there. Okay, the final end product of digestion is absorbed into the small intestine. It is absorbed into the small intestine and sent to the blood, and from blood it goes to each and every organ. Okay, so in the small intestine we have a special epithelium that is specialized to do absorption. So absorption is a function of epithelial tissue. Next one, secretion. Secretion, we know that the glands, for example the salivary gland, it secretes saliva, and in the stomach we have the gastric juices, those are secreted into the stomach. Inside the pancreas we have pancreatic juice which is secreted into the pancreas, into the duodenum. You will be learning that under systems. So there secretion happens. This secretion happens due to the help of epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissues help in the secretion of liquids or fluids in and out of the body. And the final function of epithelial tissue is sensory. There also we can get the example of the skin. Our skin is a main sensory organ. It is the organ which can sense touch, prick, pressure, temperature, all those things can be sensed by the skin. The skin sends the message to the brain and brain perceives it. So skin is doing sensory function. So skin is epithelial tissue, therefore function of epithelial tissue is sensory. Likewise, all the other sensory organs, even there, the outermost covering is epithelial tissue, so they help in sensory. So I hope you all can remember the 5 main functions of the epithelial tissue. The examiner can go for a direct question related to the functions of the epithelial tissue. Now let's move on to the next section of the animal tissue and the final section, that is the nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is one of the most important tissue present in the caudate body because it transmits impulses. If impulses are not transmitted in our body, we cannot do anything. If our nervous system is damaged, we will be in a position where we cannot raise our hands or we cannot even talk. So there are many complications related to the nervous system. Paralysis, coma, all those things are related to nervous system. Okay, under the nervous tissue, we will be studying about the structure of a single nerve cell. This nerve cell is called as neuron. One nerve cell is called as the neuron. Neuron is the structural unit of the nervous system. The whole nervous system, the neuron is the structural unit. So we'll talk about the neuron. When talking about the neuron, there are 2 parts. The first part is called the cell body. This is the structure of a neuron. The first part is called the cell body. This is the cell body. The cell body contains a nucleus. We know nucleolus, all those things. There is a nucleus. And mitochondria are present in it. And we know the Golgi body. We have studied under grade 10. Golgi bodies are also present. And also some endoplasmic reticulum, rough endoplasmic reticulum, then endoplasmic reticulum, and few other organelles are present. So this is the things present inside the cell body. Cell body is in the center of this area. The next part is the fibers. Cell body and the fibers. Nerve fibers. There are 2 types of nerve fiber. The first one is called dendrites. Those are small thin fibers which bring impulses towards the cell body. These are dendrites. It brings impulses towards the cell body. So these are called dendrites. This is one type of fiber. The next type of fiber, it is also a very important one. It is called the axon. A-X-O-N. Axon. These axons, the impulse which the dendrites bring towards the cell body is transmitted to the axon, and the axon carries impulses away from the cell body. Away from the cell body. This is the axon. And here we have a bulb thing. So this is the axon. So we know that the axon carries impulses away from the cell body. So this is the basic structure. Here, to increase the speed of transmission, there is a special mechanism. It is called myelination. In most of the chordates, the axon, mainly the axon, is myelinated. Myelination means wrapping of a myelin sheet around this axon. Now if we consider axon as this tube, myelination means wrapping of a sellotape or something around this. So it's something like this. Myelination. And the next myelination. Myelin sheet. Wrapped. Then the next one. So due to myelination, we find gaps. These are the myelin sheet. This is the myelin sheet. So myelin sheet is wrapped at intervals. So there is a small exposed axon part. This exposed axon part is called the node of Ranvier. Node of Ranvier. So we have many nodes of Ranvier. One here, and the other one here, and the next one here, and the next one here. So due to this setup, due to this myelination, what happens? Before the myelination, just imagine no myelination, what happens? Impulses travel straight along the axon. It travels like this. But after myelination, what happens? There is a block here, therefore the impulse jumps. So impulse travel in that way. So what happens? Due to the jumping of impulses from one place to the other, the speed of the transmission is increased. It is highly increased. So this is the structure of a proper structure of a neuron, and this ends at a synapsis vesicle. Fine. So there are many names: synaptic knobs, synaptic vesicle, synapsis vesicle. These can be called in any terms, but finally the impulse comes here and stops at this place. From here on, it can be a muscle or another neuron, whatever. So it keeps on going. Now let's go to the classification of neurons. When you consider neuron, there are three types of neuron. To easily remember that, remember it as SIN. S, I and N. S for sensory neuron, I for interneuron, and M for motor neuron. Sensory neuron transmits impulse from sensory organs. Those are called the receptors or the sensory organs. Example for sensory organs are the eye, nose, tongue, ear and the skin. These are the sensory organs. From the sensory organs, sensory neuron transmits the impulse to the interneuron. Interneuron is present in the central nervous system, CNS. We will be learning this deeply under nervous system, under biological systems. So central nervous system, our brain and the spinal cord, within that the interneuron is present. So interneuron is like an exchange center. From there, sensory neuron impulses are transmitted to the interneuron. From interneuron, the message comes and it is transmitted to the motor neuron. Motor neuron finally ends at the effector. Effector organ. Normally effector organs are either a muscle or a gland. So here you can understand with an example. Normally, now let's say there is a candle. Let's say that you touch the candle flame with the hand. What will happen? Immediately you will take the hand away. That is we studied that under irritability and coordination. So in this case, what happens when you place the hand in the flame? The sensory neuron is activated. The sensory neuron gets stimulated and the pain travels through the sensory neuron and it goes to the central nervous system. There a message goes to the brain, and in between that the interneuron sends a message to the motor neuron saying that now take the hand away. So the motor neuron from the central nervous system, it is finally attached to the muscles of the hand. It comes to the muscles of the hand and the final output is then the hand is taken away from the flame. This whole system is called the reflex arc. This also we will be learning later, but for now remember this whole system is called the reflex arc. It is the functional unit of the nervous system. We know that the structural unit is neuron. We have sensory neuron, interneuron and motor neuron. And the function which happens by the combination of all this is called the reflex arc. That is the functional unit of the nervous system. So for now we have studied the nervous tissue. I hope you all have got a clear idea about the nervous tissue and all the other tissues. So please watch all the other videos, mainly the first video of animal tissue, and then watch the second one so that you will get a clear understanding. And for now we have completed the first term of grade 11. I hope that all of you have subscribed to our channel. If you have any doubts, you can comment in the section below and clear your doubts. Thank you.